Hello, and welcome to the University of Illinois at Springfield Center for Lincoln Studies programming tonight. My name is Ann Mosley, and I'm the acting director for the Center for Lincoln Studies. The center provides a research facility for the University of Illinois Springfield by providing activities in relation to the study of Lincoln here in Springfield, the state of Illinois, and the nation. Through education, research, and outreach, the center provides students, faculty, scholars, and the public with opportunities to understand the life and times of the 16th president and his impact on the modern period. Tonight, it is my great pleasure to highlight a documentary that's been put together by the folks at Lincoln College up in Lincoln, Illinois, and the Lincoln Heritage Museum, where they try to tell the story not just of Abraham Lincoln and his life and legacy, but also the story of the local community and how they were able to bond together during the early years of the founding of Lincoln, Illinois. Tonight, our video is actually a documentary that was put together by Lincoln College student Zach Lucan and the former director, Ron Keller, who is now the director for the Abraham Lincoln Center for Character Development. Now, I'm going to be introducing both of our panelists tonight and their amazing accomplishments. And we actually have some brand new news about one of our panelists that will be presenting and participating this evening. Our first panelist is Ron Keller, as I mentioned earlier. He is an associate professor of history and political science. He's also the managing director of the Abraham Lincoln Center for Character Development at Lincoln College. He is the past director of the renowned Lincoln Heritage Museum and led a redesign of the new museum, which opened in 2014. He earned his associate's degree from Only Central College and his undergrad and master's degree in history from Eastern Illinois University. Keller has authored the major release, Lincoln in the Illinois Legislature, through SIU Press Concise Lincoln Library back in 2019. He also co-authored several books, including Abraham Lincoln in Logan County and A Respect for the Office, Letters from the Presidents. Additionally, he has written several feature articles for the Journal of the White House History Association, and he serves on the board of the prestigious Abraham Lincoln Association and currently serves as an alderman on the Lincoln, Illinois City Council. In 2009, he was an award recipient of the Lincoln Academy, and he was given the Order of Lincoln, which is the highest honor given to a citizen in the state of Illinois. Our second guest is actually a student from Lincoln College, and he is making a big name for himself within the mass media world. As a student, he is a junior in the Radio, TV, and New Media program, and was the recipient of the prestigious Emmy Award announced this past June 22nd in the 45th Annual Mid-American Emmy Awards competition, sponsored by the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. Zach's honors were in the short form nonfiction category for his original short film, Hate is Not Welcome Here, a piece that examines racial injustices and social issues. The film is a narrative piece featuring interviews and testimonials from Lincoln College students, faculty, and staff members. He currently has submissions for Hate is Not Welcome Here, as well as his original documentary, which we'll be discussing tonight, Our Cause is Just, in 7 international film festival competitions. He has already been notified that he is a semifinalist in the Top Shorts Film Festival, and other honors will be announced in the coming weeks. So welcome, Ron Keller and Zach.
Hey, Ann. Happy to be here with you.
Oh, It's been a wild ride, hasn't it, guys, with COVID and having to juggle school, classes, and also trying to get a little work done here and there.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
And Zach, you have definitely been a busy bee, creating not just one, but two documentaries and focusing on some key social issues that are happening here within the nation. But what I find very interesting is you're focusing on the local level, which doesn't really get a spotlight. So I look forward to talking to you more about that. But tonight I brought both of you here to discuss the documentary, Our Cause is Just. Within our event piece that we put on Facebook, we sent a link to the video. So if you have not seen it yet, feel free to take a look at our Facebook page and tune in to the hour-long documentary about this wonderful collection of letters. Now, the documentary was put together as a partnership between the Lincoln Heritage Museum and LCTV New Media Department, and is a story of John and Esther Hawes' family from Atlanta, Illinois, whose three sons, James, Henry, and George, enlisted to fight in the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. The family at home and their sons on the battlefront, spending most of their time during the Vicksburg campaign, exchanged hundreds of letters. And we're going to be getting into the story of how the museum collected these letters and also the process that you went through to discover what was in them and how you were able to figure out the importance of these letters. So Ron, can you tell us a brief history about how you received the letters when you were serving as director of the museum, and what were you told? What was your experience like? And can you explain the process a little bit to us?
Sure, Anne. Certainly, as a director of a museum, there are things which you scour to try to find that you want to be part of your collection because you know they're good. And then there are things that fall in your lap. And this is one of those. I remember getting a call one day in 2011, 2012 from Paul Beaver, who was a longtime Lincoln College professor, longtime local historian, Abraham Lincoln historian. And he said, Ron, I want to take you out for lunch, which I can't say no to that. I said, okay. He said, I want you to meet some friends of mine, Jim and Joanne Hawes from New Holland. They have something you want to see, and you want to see this. And I'm like, okay. So I said, what is it? And he said, they have some Civil War letters, but they're not just any letters. These are amazing. I'm like, okay. So if Paul was a pretty even-keeled guy. Unfortunately, he left us a few years ago. But he didn't get he got excited about history. But this, I mean, he was like, you have to see this. And when we saw these letters, we went to Jim and Joanne Hawes' house, and there's a pile of letters that they had on their kitchen table. Wrapped up in rubber bands, and they knew they had gone through these, so they knew that there were some important things in these letters, and they probably had read them all. But again, I kept my expectations low because, again, I've seen Civil War letters. And Civil War letters, by the way, I don't want to dismiss them because they are important history. There are connections of the past. And these were letters which are written, any Civil War letters are written personally and telling stories, right? So I knew that they would be something good, but I was floored myself. I was like, oh my gosh, wow. When I started reading these letters, and I know we'll probably get into it, but letters about Lincoln and about emancipation and about their views of slavery and about the horrors of war. And then when I came across the letter that, I'm sure we'll talk about later, the Louisa Hawes letter, I was like, oh my gosh. And so I sheepishly asked them, so what's your hope for these letters? Because I'd heard they were wanting to donate them, but, I didn't want these letters to leave my hands forever. So, and so they said, we want to donate them to the museum. And then they brought out pictures of these letters. And so I knew we had a gold mine. But at that moment, I think I was sitting at that kitchen table also thinking, we got a story that needs to be told. These letters just can't be sitting on a shelf in a museum. They have to come alive. They have to come alive in the form of an exhibit. They have to come alive in the form of a book. And even then, I didn't know I would have such a great partnership with a great student like Zach Lucan, but at that time, but I knew it was like, this has to be a documentary. We have to get this story told because it's so unique. And it's so riveting, all these letters. So that's how we acquired them. And Jim and Joanne Hawes have been very, very good to work with through the years in helping us do what we needed to do, and very supportive and very encouraging of our museum and what we're doing with these letters through the years. I think you're on mute there, Ann.
I am. I always forget that. So can you give us kind of a timeline of when you received the letter? So then as we go through this discussion, we can develop a kind of how long it took to go through the process.
So the letters, there are about 120 letters, if my count is correct. We acquired them in 2012. And immediately shows how underestimated I perceive this project to be. I said, well, maybe we could produce something in about 2 years, a year or two. Well, the problem is that we had to get these letters out. We had to transcribe them because and some of the handwriting is difficult, and especially in the letters where they have where the letters cross each other because they wrote on the back of a page and they ran out of paper, so they wrote across ways. So like we had to really peer and find these letters and find out what they're saying. But it's hard to find time to do this. And so we had a core of amazing volunteers through the years to really help us transcribe these things. So acquiring them in 2012, we honestly didn't do much for several years because we had a thing called the redesign and opening of the new Lincoln Heritage Museum. And so they were put on the back burner, and it was really only in about 2015 and 2016 when we returned to the letters and said, this is a project which we need to make a priority. Under the directorship of a great person named Ann Mosley, I know that took a next step forward in making that happen, and having these volunteers work with these letters on a daily basis was the only way we were able to get the letters transcribed. And so then in 2019, 2020, we were finished with them. We contacted Jim and Joanne Hawes. We made a book, a collection of these letters to give to them. We made an exhibit, which is now currently at the Lincoln Heritage Museum on the Hawes family and the Hawes collection. And then in 2019, what is today? What was 2020? I guess Zach was in it, fall of 2020 when I approached you, and maybe it was even before that. I think that maybe even 2019 when we said, let's do this. And then we finally made it happen in 2020 in a very, very, very quick timeline, which I couldn't have done it without these great students who I just, and I think it was November, December of last year, we said, can we get this done by May? Zach said, no problem. And we got it done. And so it was released in May of 2021 to the public, and now out there for everyone to see.
Well, that's wonderful, Ron. And it looks like it just took forever to get through all of those letters. And if I remember correctly, you were lucky to get at least 2 to 3 letters done a month, maybe, because in the midst of having other work that had to be done, and volunteers came in, scheduled times throughout the week. So it took some time to get through all of them. Jim and Joanne were so patient through the process.
Yeah, and what made it, I think, more difficult too is because we as historians, when we transcribe letters, and the volunteers got into this too, you develop a thing called the rabbit hole, where you find something like, oh my gosh, and we do research on it, and then you do further research on it. And I remember talking with, maybe it was Lynn Spellman, about the Battle of Vicksburg for about an hour. She said, the Battle of Vicksburg was pretty important, wasn't it? And so we started talking about that. Then she started researching this, and we started researching the other people that were part of the battle. Then you find names, and when you find these names, you want to research who these people are. And it does. It leads you down this rabbit hole. And before you know it, you're like, I haven't even transcribed the letter because I've been so immersed in trying to find these stories that add to this main story. But that's okay. That's the part of the discovery, and that's part of makes history really fascinating and fun, is really doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and what was so fortunate within the collection, if I remember correctly, Jim and Joanne loaned you images of the actual soldiers that were writing.
Yeah, they did, and we made digital images of them. They didn't make that as a loan. The letters are a donation, but the photographs were a loan, which we fully understood and fully appreciated, because they wanted to keep, these are family heirlooms. These are photographs of their ancestors. So we thought, yeah, no problem. That's fine. But again, to have Civil War letters is one thing, but to have photographs of these very people we're talking about is amazing, because you can visualize. And so every time I was reading a letter from Henry, I was looking at the picture of Henry, and I always pictured him writing this letter, or John or Esther, any of the family. You just, or having, just picturing Esther reading the letter from George or Henry, and almost crying and clutching the letter to her heart, thinking, I wish my dear boy could come home. I wish he was here talking to me in my living room. And those kind of things that's what makes history really come alive, is because we have a personal story. So the photographs really made it so much more personal for us. And really, obviously, this documentary made it much better, having visuals instead of just having the letters.
Well, and for the folks at home who have not seen the dashing figure that is Henry Hawes, I actually have his picture here to share with you. There he is.
Yep. Yes, he is.
This is Henry when he first enlists. And Ron, if you remember correctly, one of his letters, he goes into great detail about enlisting and being centered at the fairgrounds here in Springfield and sleeping on the amphitheater. And how he was not used to the diet of a soldier, and how his stomach disagreed with him. And we come to find out that his stomach disagreed with him throughout the whole entire war.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
But yeah. Do you remember the date of that letter?
I don't exactly remember. That was going through my mind as you're talking about that. I'm thinking, when was that? But obviously it was late 1861, or early 1862. Because he was obviously the last to enlist. James had gone, George had gone, and so here he is still at home and wanting the glory of war. And you're right. Unfortunately, here's Henry, who is sick in this tent so often. And honestly, I don't want to ruin the story for anybody who hasn't watched the documentary, so I'll try not to. But throughout the letters, every time I saw Henry get sick, I'm like, this man's going to die. He's going to die in the battlefield. And so, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I'm not going to say anything. But it becomes a battle that I think he has to face. And so, not to skip ahead or anything, but when we did some reenactments, and Zach can talk about this too, it's funny. He chose another student, Spencer Davis, to do some of our reenactments. And Henry was a very slight build. And he was 17 when he enlisted, very, very slight build. And again, many of his fellow soldiers took one look at him and said, okay, in fact, I think the quote was, you're a pretty boy. You should have stayed home with your mother. You'll be under the ground in 6 months. And I'm thinking, so nothing against Spencer, but here's this man who's a slight build. And I thought, man, that's so Henry. And I could almost see him having the gumption, to fight even more, because he's a man of slight build and really wanting to prove himself, which he does.
Well, and out of all the hundreds of letters, as historians, we read through every single one of them, even the ones we don't transcribe, because we want to know the whole story. We want to know what's next. And you had something very unique in this group of letters. You didn't just have one character, you had multiple, and what I like to call the double rainbow, which is you don't just have a letter to someone, you also have the letter of them writing back. Mm-hmm. So you got to see the response, which you never see in a collection of letters. And if you do, it's very rare.
Good point. Yeah, good point. And you're right. And knowing, and that again, that makes it all more personal and even more heart wrenching, because these letters, you can see Henry and George both talk about mother. I hope mother is not worrying at home. And near the end of the war, she becomes very sick. We don't even know what we don't know. It's lost to history what actually happened, but she may have been close to death. She does survive, but you can see in these letters the anguish, and John, the father, tries to say she's okay. Don't worry about her. She's okay. But you're right. You can just feel the exchange and just the warmth between them, the love between them, and the concern on all sides, from the home front and from the battlefront.
Well, and in the midst of that, you also get a sense of the character or the personality of each writer. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us, what was George like? Because he was the one who had the earliest letters within the collection, if I remember correctly.
Oh, he was fiery. Oh, George is fiery. He doesn't hold back. He rips the secessionist a new one all the time. He's basically talking about, in fact, he's very critical of the Lincoln administration, and they don't pursue enough of a policy against the secessionists. He says, and I wish I had the quote in front of me, but he's actually calling for a scorched earth policy. If it's up to George, he would basically say, let's invade the South and destroy everything in our path to get these guys just defeated. And so he's very, very fiery and very temperamental. Henry seems to be a little bit more reticent, and maybe it's again because of his nature, his personality, his temperament, maybe a slight build or whatever, maybe because he's the last to fight in the war, but his personality is very much more withdrawn. But George doesn't hold back at all.
What do you think of Georgezak when he was being described by the historians in the documentary?
I mean, like what Ron said, fiery. You could tell that he had a chip on his shoulder. He was the character who, or I can't even say character because it was a real person, but it was, somebody who was out there to prove something. And yeah, it just made for an interesting dynamic. And I really liked it.
Well, and George came from a different location than the rest of the Hawes family when they enlisted. Can you tell us, Ron, where George enlisted?
He was in Ohio, and so he was going to college. And I think that there was a lot of pressure because other people were leaving and going to college as well, or from college, they were being drafted and enlisting. So I think he felt that pressure to go for the glory of war. And it's not unique. You read any of these Civil War letters at the very beginning, and there is this sense of glory of war. Obviously, had they realized that this glory of war would turn into a drudgery of 4 years of horrific bloodshedding, I don't know if they would have been so eager, but nonetheless, he is eager. He signs up. He even basically writes back home. Mom and Dad have joined the force, joined the army, and it's like no asking for permission because he didn't have to. He was of age. Still, he's like, I have done it, by the way. He's gone, and so I think that really set George just really wanted to go. And of course, then Henry, as we've talked about, I think that made him even more yearning to join his brother. Because he's reading these letters from George back home, talking about the glory of war. And he doesn't want to miss out on that. He wants as well to join that particular fight.
Well, and what's interesting too, during that time, even though men were of age, it was known as common courtesy to ask your parents. If you were still living at home, if you were still going to school, you had to ask them for everything. Mm-hmm. And the fact that George didn't, it also adds to his personality, which is, you know what, I believe in this strong enough. I'm going to go against my parents' wishes, who I've stood by my whole life. Because you get a sense from the letters that there's a lot of respect for their parents. Mm-hmm. But for those at home who are not familiar with the documentary and the letters themselves, there were 5 children of John and Esther. John married Esther after she had 3 other children. 1 passed away. The 2 surviving children were James Ewing, Then you had Louisa, who by the time war breaks out, she's already married and has her own family. And then you have George, who was the first son between John and Esther. And then you have Henry, who is the second son. And then you have Martha, I really like Martha a lot in her letters. And so this is the family dynamic that we're looking at within these letters. And with Henry being the last son, that puts added pressure on him because he's the youngest. And he's the only boy who has not enlisted at this time, because you have George and James who have already enlisted. And so you have Henry, who's chomping at the bit, going to school at Eureka, and his mom is just holding on as long as she can, because she doesn't want all of her boys on the front. So it's interesting to see that. So Ron, before we get to the documentary, I want to ask you, what was your favorite letter out of all of them?
Oh my gosh. Can I pick like the top 100? I mean, there are so many good things. I think that the couple of the lines that stood out, which I don't know if I had a favorite one, but I'll pick a couple. George's, when George writes about the war and the meaning of it, and he uses the phrase "our cause is just," I knew at that moment when I read that line that this was the hook, right? This was the key point because he talks about in this letter, our cause is just and heaven will prosper us. And he goes on to basically say, I know you probably want me home, but I want to fight to prove myself. I'm paraphrasing, so that when I come home, you will not be ashamed of me. And so, gosh, I'm like, I almost felt a little pain right there, because I felt that they had to prove his manhood, and they had to prove that they were fighting a just cause and a noble cause. And this was for them. This is for the nation. I mean, he was tied up in this. And man, that's a true soldier right there, when he sees the cause of what he's fighting for and believes fervently and is even willing to die for that cause. I mean, that hit me. And I think every soldier feels that, but that for me was sort of the foundation, right, of this entire documentary, of a soldier's willingness to go for his country, to have a cause that is just, and be willing to fight fervently to the end for that cause.
You bring up a good point. As I went through the letters, one of the things that really struck me was not really one particular phrase, but you can see that Henry was a bit more sentimental. He was full of heart, and he truly cared for his family back home. And so his letters were constantly dripping of, I want to hear news from home. I want to hear about what my neighbors and friends are doing. How is Martha, or as he called her, Maddie, doing? And then you have Maddie, who is so young and is still learning how to write. And she doesn't know how to write certain letters, so she draws pictures instead.
Yeah.
But I would have to say the most harrowing story that I was able to account from this group of letters is the fact that John, who was a farmer, took time away from his crops, which, if you know any farmer, they don't give up a day, because every day counts. But he gave up time to hunt down his son George, who was sick in a hospital, because he didn't write back quick enough. And so here is this father searching all over, trying to find his son, who he eventually does find, and finds out that he's sick, but he's going to be okay. But the fact back in those days, if they didn't write, then you had to go out and hunt for them yourself. So that was one of the stories that really stuck out to me. The love of a parent, a love of a father.
It's one of those. It's one of those stories too that I wanted to include. But as Zach knows, we this when you make a documentary, which I'm sure we'll get to and get his perspective on this. When you make a documentary, you have to decide what to keep and what to not keep. You have to decide what's the maximum time length. And Zach can attest to this. My original goal was a half hour. Okay, then maybe 35 to 40 minutes. All right, we need to keep it at 45 minutes. And then he told me what'd you say, Zach? It was 50, it's about an hour. And I said, we absolutely cannot go over an hour. And so we had to decide there were some stories that had to hit the cutting room floor. And that was one of them, unfortunately, but it pained me. But you can't tell the whole story, I guess. You can't tell everything.
Well, I actually have the video up, and I'm going to show a teaser of it, but I wanted the folks at home to hear the history of the collection and what was in it, because in order to make this documentary, you had to rely, Zach, a lot on Ron and the staff at the museum for the content and to find out, what are the stories that really stood out and what their take was in historic context. But Zach, what got you motivated to actually do this documentary?
So Ron approached me back in 2019 about this. I think I was just a sophomore at that point. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. I'm glad it didn't happen around that point because I was not as experienced as I am now. So what really motivated me was this can be on my resume. This is work. For those who don't know, and for those who watching don't know, I love filmmaking. It's my passion. It's my only passion, and it's what I want to dive into. And so when Ron jumped onto this, he basically just he said, "Hey, I'm looking for some help. Here's what it is." And I love history as well. I always have. I'm not exactly the best at it. I'm better at filmmaking. So I was like, oh, well, we can combine the two, and we can do this. And so when I started to hear the story, and when we started to do some, production meetings and started, kind of talk about everything, I was like, okay, this can be really good. This can be, something that people are going to watch and really be invested into. And sure enough, when I was editing, I was invested in it. I was like, all right, what's next? And, I'm looking at the script, and it was great from top to bottom. It was a mix of, my love for filmmaking and just, a true local story about, bravery and about honor and, all these different, amazing, traits. It's just, I was very motivated.
Well, and that I think makes a good documentary is a passion for the topic. And you clearly had it when you made this documentary, because when you go through the film, you get the feel of the letters, but you don't get that just from the words. You get it from the background music, the students who came in and did the reenactments for some of the scenes, but also the way that you were able to pan in from one area to the next. So getting started, for those who are looking to go into film editing or directing and are maybe even in high school trying to figure out, I like this, but I don't know if it's the right route. What was your starting point? How did you get the ball rolling to put this documentary together?
So I came from Lincoln Community High School right here in Lincoln, Illinois. And unfortunately, we didn't really have much of a background for editing and media. So I came into Lincoln College with no idea of how to edit, no idea how to run a camera, lighting, the whole spectrum. I didn't know how to do any of it. But I knew going in, this is what I wanted to do. I knew that filmmaking, it was always going to be that's what I'm doing. No doubt about it. And so going in here, my freshman year, I was here, at the TV station, editing, whatever I can, commercials. I was doing promo pieces for, local companies here in town. I just wanted to help the local community. So I did. I went out, I did this stuff for free. Hey, I'd love to film this for you. It's free advertisement. Who doesn't like that? And so I'd film it for them. And to be quite honest, if you're starting off as a filmmaker, in the videography, you're going to produce some crap. at first. It's just the way it is. And then as you go along, you start to get better. You always get better. And if you're not, then you know that maybe this isn't it. And so as you're getting better, it's really starting to motivate you. So that's why when I said at the time I was not ready, I was eager to do it, but now looking at it, I was like, ooh, like I don't know if it would have been the same as what it is now. And so, that's why when this came about, I was like, okay, like this is a real test now. Let's see what I can do from what I've learned for the past 3.5 years. What can I translate to this project that will be shown on a national level? And so that's how it came about.
Well, and Lincoln College has a wonderful media program. And a lot of times when you go through a university or a college, you have a professor or a particular course that really stood out to you, that made you the type of person and honed your skills very sharply. Is there a particular person or class that impacted you a lot and really aided you in the creation of this?
Absolutely. John Malone and Bud Broyles and Jesse Gwynn. They are the three foundations to this practicum, to this major. And, they've really built something incredible. I mean, a national award-winning level. And what's so special is these three instructors, I don't call them teachers. They're instructors because they don't have the traditional teaching background. They were not in this to begin with to teach. They were in the field, in the radio field, and talk radio. Bud Broyles worked on projects such as Lethal Weapon. He toured with Reba. He's done, he was with the Chicago Bulls in the 90s. He's done, television. Jesse Gwynn is a current, meteorologist in Peoria. So we have people who are in the field. And that's what makes this program stick out from a lot of different programs. And I'm not saying that we're one of a kind, and because I imagine there are other programs like that in America, but for the local level and for people who are not aware, Lincoln College is really blessed. We really have it good here because we have three wonderful minds, and with them together, we've been able to produce national level content. We have beaten schools in competitions such as University of Texas, Florida A&M. There's so many different University of Arizona. There are different schools that we competed up against and showed that Lincoln College is small in size, but we come for the battle, and we've got a good program here.
Well, and in putting the documentary together, you had to call on a number of your fellow classmates to participate. And asking them to be a part of a documentary that you were putting together. How did you rope them in? Because from my experience, most college students are not quite interested in documentaries. It tends to be a bit boring, or history doesn't seem to kind of get them, excited. How were you able to motivate your classmates to participate?
So really, I reached out to some of my, close friends within the program. I reached out to Adam Hoffman, who is now graduated, and he's in Tennessee now. But I reached out to him first. I said, hey, this came about, like, we're really starting to get the ball rolling here. Would you be interested in helping me? And he was absolutely in. He was all in. He's like, let's do this. It's something new. It's not a lot of people get that opportunity to dive into. So when they heard about this, and like I said, Adam Hoffman, Spencer Davis, who we've talked about already, and Noah Henry. Those are my three mains, and they really, like I said, when I came to them about this, I was like, hey, would you like to step up and help out? They were all in. And Victoria Smith's another one. She was actually a voice actress within this documentary, and I was like, hey, like, this is a documentary. I don't know if you're interested. How you feeling? And she was all about it. She was just like, yeah, let's do it. Like, that sounds awesome. Like, I've never touched a documentary before. So, I was very thankful and, very blessed to have a group around me that was willing to go all in on this. And, they definitely, without them, truly, I know it's kind of cliche to say, but if without them, I probably wouldn't have the same product I do have now.
Well, and in the creation of it, they played a huge role in saying some of the major quotes throughout the documentary. And folks, for those who are tuning in from home, these are all college students that are putting this together. This is something that they've worked really hard on in trying to convey a collection that most people don't get to see on a day-to-day basis as a rich story to tell. And if you're not a historian, most of the times you don't even know that the letters are even in existence. But I encourage you to reach out to the Lincoln Heritage Museum to obtain copies of the transcripts or even the letters themselves, because they do have a rich story to tell. And so to have a group of students starting off and discovering these letters, turning them into something wonderful, it's just amazing to see. So Zach, as we are getting close to the Q&A section, I want to ask you, I asked Ron this earlier, what his favorite letter was, but what was your favorite part of the documentary? Either putting it together or just a scene that you really enjoyed watching?
Really hard question, not gonna lie. I would have to say, while making it, I think a part that I was really eager to get onto, and I know Ron, we talked about this early in advance, was the ending. How my editing and the way I timeline it is very different from your conventional. I like to have point A, and then I like to have our destination, and then I like to fill in. And so I created the opening and I sent that to Ron. I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Yeah, I like this. This is, we can work with this." And then I had the ending, which which Ron and I had talked about quite extensively. And he had this idea, and I think it came to life pretty well. But I created that ending. And while creating it, I was like, okay, I think this can work. We did some altercations to it and whatnot, but for the most part, while working on it, that was a piece that I really liked. And then while watching it, really, I think one of my favorite scenes, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but when I think it's Henry runs into General Grant. And that, to me, when I was editing, I was like, this is hilarious. This is awesome. This is, when you hear the story, you're like, this is so bizarre, but it's true. And you still have a comedy movie, but it's real life. It's in the letter. So, yeah, I just thought it was one of those, I thought it was a story that, it really attached to me, and that's one of my favorite parts of the documentary.
And I'll tag on to that to compliment Zach on the brilliance of, and this is the beauty of filmmaking, is that, because I have a script, right? I had the script, and I think it was a pretty good story. But man, I mean, when you see the tricks and the cool things, and like we talked about the music, but Zach's vision, oh man, that's even better than what I thought it was going to be. And again, Adam and Noah and Spencer as well added to that. But it was pretty cool how all that tied in together. And so I would agree. So again, we're fortunate. I know you keep saying this, but we're fortunate in Lincoln College. And this is going to sound like a plug, but for any student who really is interested in this, we got a great program, and I'm glad that we have Zach one more year to basically lead the way for some of these new students. But again, I think that was that I loved it. I watched this several times, and I had this little tear that kept forming in my eye every single time at the very end of the documentary.
Well, Zach, Ron, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to show a little teaser, and then we're going to kick off our question and answer. I promise I won't give too much away, but I want to give people a little bit of a taste if they haven't seen the documentary yet. All right, so if you'll bear with me, this is the first time I'm sharing a screen and a video at the same time.
interesting to me just because they were your typical family.
It's very interesting reading these letters because of the different layers within the letters. Many times you would see information about different battles from the Civil War, but within the same letter, where we talk about different things happening at home as well. So again, this goes back to the idea of how our local community was affected by this national event.
John W. Hawes II was one of the 12 children, and he was the father of Henry Hawes, who was involved in these letters with his brothers, his half-brother, with his family, concerning his time in the Civil War.
All right, folks. So that's your little teaser into the documentary, Our Cause is Just. If you're interested in watching the whole film, I have included the link within the comments, and you're more than welcome to click on that, and it'll take you straight to the LCTV page where you can see the documentary. And if you want to see the actual documents, you'll want to reach out to Ron Keller and Olivia Partlow, who is the director of the Lincoln Heritage Museum, to learn more about the collection and how you can see those. So I'm going to open up the Q&A. For those who are interested in asking questions to Zach and to Ron regarding their documentary and the process, the history, or even just future projects, I encourage you to ask them now. So while we're waiting, Zach, you have some exciting things that you're waiting on. So can you fill us in a little bit on where you have entered the documentary, both this one and your other one, which I'll let you say the name of it.
Okay, so yeah, recently, as you kind of mentioned, I've been very busy. With Our Cause is Just, I've really been looking at getting some more traction with this. I think this is a story that needs to be told. I think this is a story that was very different. You don't hear about this a whole lot. And so what I've been doing is I've been inserting this into film festivals across the nation, and not only the nation, but also across the world. Recently, we insert our Cause is Just into the Munich Film Awards. Unfortunately, we did not make it, but there was also 10,000 entries. So deep competition. I'm not, torn up about it, but it's like, maybe next year. But also, we're going to some other festivals known as the Jelly Film Festival, the Independent Film Festivals in Los Angeles, California, the New York Film Independent Film Festival. There's loads across the board that I've been working on with this festival, and I'm trying to get more documentary-based festivals, but they aren't allowing exceptions, or I should say, entries for another few months. So we'll have to wait for that. With my other film, Hate Is Not Welcome Here, I've been very gracious enough to get some traction going with that and some real momentum going. With Hate Is Not Welcome Here, we filmed that in the middle of filming Our Cause is Just. We filmed it in one day. We got it done and edited in one day, and we sent it out the next day, and we had people talking about it. Recently, as you mentioned at the beginning, I did receive a Mid-American Emmy for that, which is, to me, one of the highest honors you can get, especially in college, for, communications and for my editing. So yeah, I was gracious enough to get that. I was also honorable mention for my best editing work with various works, Hate Is Not Welcome Here, Our Cause is Just, different, projects like that. I've also been, we're gracious enough to get second place actually in inspirational film for the Top Shorts Film Festival in the United States. So we got second place, which is also a huge honor. Again, we were competing up against, I think, 3,000 entries for that. So, that was also really huge. And I also, Hate Is Not Welcome Here will be in theaters actually in New York City in, I want to say, the winter. And so we're still kind of working on a date, but in New York City, it'll be a part of the festival, the Young Filmmakers Film Festival. And, we'll be in theaters. So I think it's kind of a neat little thing. And we're still waiting to hear back from a few festivals. We have some in France, we have some in Italy, and we have, I think, one more in, somewhere in Europe. I've answered quite a bit, so I have to apologize.
But you have one closer to home.
Yes. So that was actually where the inspiration came from for Hey, Does That Welcome Here? Lincoln College reached out to me about filming about this festival, and they're like, hey, we know you're kind of into this, like, what do you think? And so they sent it to me, and I was like, oh, sure, why not? I'll take my my gab at it. And it really, when I made it, I was like, this is going to be for the festival, and I put it out there for people to see, and the feedback from it was amazing, was astonishing, and that's what really made it about. But the film festival that you're talking about is the No Mouse Film Festival at UIS. I believe we'll be hearing about the nominees and or winners here in the coming week or so. I mean, it's right around the corner. I'm very excited for it, and like I said, I hope to get another feather in my cap and keep on going, get some more momentum.
Well, and it's always really amazing to see Illinois colleges coming together to celebrate the great work that all of our colleges and universities are doing, because each section of the state has its own unique gifts and basically the programs that causes their college to exceed. And so it's amazing to see Lincoln College and UIS come together and showcase one of the films that you were able to put together. So it's not looking like we have a lot of questions from the audience. So audience members, if you have questions, submit them, or I'll keep asking questions for a short amount of time. I wish that we were able to have done this as a live panel, because originally what we had planned was to have the film play and then have our panel discussion afterwards. But because of COVID and UIS not opening up as quickly as everyone else, but we're taking our time making sure that everyone is safe, because safety is first. And hopefully we'll be able to showcase the documentary when you win more awards. We'll have to bring it back. So we have one question from Kevin Schmidt. Where can we find the letters? Now, Ron, I'm going to hand this one to you.
Okay, we lost them. So if you can find them, contact us. The Lincoln Heritage Museum, as we've said, has the letters in our collection, and as mentioned, you can contact the museum. Our hope is at some point is to perhaps put these online. At this particular point, what we have is the transcriptions. By appointment, if somebody contacts the museum, we can probably let someone see the letters and close up and even read them close up as well. So contact the Lincoln Heritage Museum in Lincoln, Illinois, and we'd love to have people come up and view the letters. And as well, again, as I mentioned, there's a special exhibit about the Hawes family. So it would be a good time to come up now, because we have that exhibit to see when you're here looking at the letters.
Well, and for those who are not in the area, that are out of state or even out of the country, if you're looking to take a look at the letters and you have a date in mind or a topic in mind, I'm pretty sure that the individuals who volunteer but also research at the Lincoln Heritage Museum will be more than happy to help you find the letter you are looking for. Mm-hmm. Also, a huge hint is if you watch the documentary, you get a sense of a lot of the different types of letters. So I encourage you to watch the documentary first before calling the museum. It'll give you a better idea of what you'll be looking at.
Good point. One other thing I'll add, you talked earlier, Ann, about some things in the letters. And I guess one thing that I was surprised at that I did not expect, because it's not often found in Civil War letters, is discussions on race and slavery. These letters for a family in the North, and I think that those people who are familiar, viewers who are familiar with Illinois in the Civil War, we were a northern state. Certainly, we were a free state, but that certainly didn't mean that there was a lot of sympathy for the Black race. And so I didn't expect that there would be a lot of conversations in the letters about the plight of slavery and the plight of the Black man. And if there was, there certainly wouldn't be a lot of sympathy. And I was floored. George writes about how cursed slavery is, and that this is and says it pointedly, that this is a war for the liberation of slavery. You don't see that very often, even in Union letters. And to me, that was remarkable, how anti-slavery, and I don't know if I would call this family abolitionist, because that's a very strong word to use in that time period. But certainly these people were, the Hawes family were very enlightened in that respect. And I was very appreciative of the family. I just wanted to give them a hug through history to that, and a high five to that, to having that attitude.
Well, and in going through a lot of the letters, you get a feel of first encounters with African Americans in the South. And I was really hit by, I think it was Henry, who stated the condition that they were living in and being shocked by it. I think that really hit home too, because most people in the North didn't really realize what it was like in the South for a number of Black Americans. And so for him to come in contact with that. One thing I will ask everyone who is viewing, if you ever come across a Civil War journal, don't throw it away, because we are still looking for Henry Hawes's journal. So if it's out there somewhere, let the Lincoln Heritage Museum know, because Henry Hawes eventually wrote about his experiences in the Civil War at the latest point in his life. And it's an amazing journal, or amazing story. He only quotes certain parts of the journal, but we haven't been able to locate it. So if you do find it, let us know. So.
And one thing I guess I would, and I'm not the one asking the questions, but I guess I'm not sure Zach and I have ever had this conversation necessarily to this point. But, when we talk about making a documentary, making a connection to the people, I guess I would want to know, Zach, what is that in your mind that you would say, how do you connect as a filmmaker? How do you connect a story to the people? What is the what I'm asking, and particularly maybe with this particular story, what is it you think was, how do you do that? What's the mechanism, and how you really connect? What is that golden nugget to do that?
Well, I mean, like I said, this was the first project I really took upon. It is a more difficult challenge because it is a documentary. So with your goal as a documentary, you want to, teach, you want to inform your audience on a certain subject matter. But as all films, you want to entertain. You want to bring them in and get them hooked. So as you kind of said, what is it that the hook is? Well, it really, to me, it's the local level that this takes place on. It's that local tangible. I mean, it's this local family that is still around this day. And, we get to look at it from, over 100 years ago. We get to look at this point of view during, the war. And so to me, while making this, I really wanted to, that's why kind of at the beginning, I really wanted to include that this is a local family. And, even if you are, from afar, say you're in New York, and you're not from the Logan County area, you can still relate to somebody who is from a small part of the world and goes out to conquer something that's bigger than themselves. It's about the country. And so I really wanted to focus on the fact that, some, Joe Schmo from the middle of nowhere can go out and conquer this. So that's what I really wanted to tackle upon when making this.
Love that. Thank you.
Well, and Zach, today there are a lot of conversations on social justice, which we see in the letters. We see Henry and George's passion, even when Henry writes back on how to handle copperheads. He doesn't go out and say attack them. He says, here's a step by step, and he ends up making like a pamphlet for his family.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what's interesting is both of the videos that you created have something to do with social justice. Do you see that as something that motivates you and drives you? I'm not meaning to corner you on it, but I'm getting a sense that that's something that you have strong feelings about.
Yeah, I mean, like in the past, year, our this country has really seen, some dark times, really, with social matters. It's really come to light, and with the hate is not welcome here, a kind of focal point, the kind of shifting point of that was the George Floyd video. That was a huge matter within this country. It was a huge matter across the world, and I think within both, we just see that these social issues have been going on for hundreds of years. It's not something that's been brewing for the past 10 years. It's not something that's been brewing since, the George Floyd incident. This has been something we've been going over back and forth since, the beginning of our country. And I think this is something, that's why with Hate is Not Welcome here, I really wanted to make that a focal point of, times need to change. It's been, over, 200 years or whatever. It's time to, get past this issue. And with Our Cause is Just, again, you even see from the point of view of Henry and George of basically saying, hey, I'm fighting to get past this. Let's move on. This shouldn't be a thing. And so that's why I think both, they do kind of work together. I never really thought about it, but yeah, they do kind of both work together in the fact that you're fighting and they're discussing the fact that, we can't be ignoring this. We gotta get past this. We have to fight for it. We have to, you have to work together to get past this issue.
Well, and something that's not mentioned in the documentary, but it's mentioned in the letters, is the fact that even though Henry and George and their family are strong Lincoln supporters, partially because their father knew Lincoln when he was living in Illinois, but they spoke out against the Lincoln administration a few times because they did not like what the administration was doing. And so they made a point to say something and have a complaint. And I find that interesting, too, because today Lincoln is being discussed on, was he a great emancipator? Was he a great guy? Well, and here you have his friends who know him the best talking about him and disagreeing with him on a few things. And I find that very comforting because it showcases that even our closest friends love us so much that they're willing to criticize us and tell us when we're doing something that they think is wrong. And so that's something that I feel like I learned quite a bit from those letters, is the blunt honesty that these men had. And it showcases, too, the friends that Lincoln made were not individuals who always puffed him up. They were individuals who challenged him every day. Yeah. And it looks like George and Henry saw that within themselves as well as challengers, and deciding to speak up when they needed to.
Yeah, I mean, and to add on to that real quick, I'm not the biggest historian, but it also shows that Lincoln he's only human. He's not perfect. Not everybody likes him, and so to get that point of view, it's, it's nice. It's refreshing, I guess, to, see that, yeah, even his closest allies, they're like, hey, I don't agree with you on this. I support you, but I think you went wrong. And that's life. That's being a human, so,
Mm-hmm. And we all know Lincoln, of course, was roundly criticized by all circles of people. And when it comes to emancipation, there were those who felt that he was moving too fast, too far, that he was abusing his power, that he certainly didn't. He was taking too much of a risk, that the Union troops wouldn't support it. There would be desertion with emancipation. But then there were others who felt that Lincoln was reluctant and way too reluctant. And the Hawes family are on that side, who feel that have impatience. that Lincoln isn't moving fast enough. And so I certainly include the Hawes family almost in the radical camp of people who are basically saying, let's move a little faster with this. And I think partly it is because they're in war and they want to get this war over with. And they see that the war will not end until there is some firm resolution and firm policy and firm commitment and firm action to getting the war done and completed. And so which is why they're not only critical of Lincoln, they're very critical of McClellan, who they feel is way too slow. Of course, Lincoln did ultimately fire him because of that. But they're getting a sense. They're on the front lines. They're the ones basically who are seeing this and have to deal with this, which all soldiers do. War is an extension of politics, just on a real fashion. And so you're right. We do see that in his letters, which even makes them even more interesting and fascinating to me.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight and talking about the documentary. Folks, I hope all of you are able to enjoy it, learn from it, and are able to see that there are great things happening around us here in Central Illinois, and that the Lincoln story as well as the local story constantly are combined. And getting to know the 16th president on a deeper level by looking at him as an ordinary man made extraordinary based on the individuals he came in contact with and the fact he was able to persevere and learn from mistakes he has made, but also recognize the advances that he has made in his life as well, thanks to the people here in Illinois. So I want to thank you both, Ron and Zach. We look forward to seeing more exciting news coming out of the Lincoln Heritage Museum. You have a wonderful collection that has always surprised us over the years. You always find something new and exciting to share with the public. And we look forward to seeing what you have next on display. And Zach, we're looking forward and we're cheering you on for all of your different entries that you have made over the years with your documentaries and those to come. And we look forward to seeing more productions by Zach.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Ann. It is a pleasure to be with you tonight.
And thank you to all of our attendees. And I hope you're able to tune in next time when we tell more stories about Abraham Lincoln, his life and legacy, and what we can learn about it today. So I hope everyone has a wonderful night, and we'll see you next time.